Hey everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. If you haven't been here before, this is predominantly a turning channel where each and every week I teach people how to make things on the lathe. This week we're going to be working with some cherry burl, and it's seen better days. Lots of cracks in this piece, so of course the only way to really save this is with some epoxy. So before we do anything with this though, we got to clean it up. So we're going to go over to the bench, strip off the remaining bark, and get this cleaned up and get it ready for casting. So getting right into this, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for stopping in and watch this video. And if you're not aware of it, I do upload every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern. And of course, I turn my videos into premieres. And then that way we can use the live chat function and talk about the project as it's being made. Now this cherry burl is pretty normal for this area. It's hard to get a really decent solid cherry burl out of here. A lot of times you're dealing with a lot of dry rot like this piece has. All right, so this is shelving liner that you can get at Costco. I know it's kind of hit or miss. A lot of times Costco doesn't have regular things like this. They seem to switch manufacturers or whatever. But anyway, I got this at Costco if you're wondering, and it actually works great for stuff like this. I really like using this material here for castings like this, filling in void areas and making little dams. It works absolutely fantastic. One of the benefits of it too is it has ribs on it, and you can kind of line those ribs up to keep the keep it straight if that's an issue. And anyway, lots of glue here, doubled glued, just to make sure we don't have any problems. All right, so I think that it is important that this goes into the vacuum chamber. This is kind of punky, soft wood here. I did have to trim a couple of inches off here in order to make that happen. But anyway, there's just some really substandard grain in here that could really use some epoxy to harden up. So anyway, this is a disc that's going to go into our ice cream container bucket. So I'm going to glue this to it, and then we'll put the sleeve over top of it, and we'll get some resin mixed up here. Since coming to resin casting, the one thing that really shocks me is how long it takes to prep pieces like this. I use a lot of hot melt glue, and I think that that's one of the keys to success when you're working with kind of a casting like this. Don't spare that hot melt glue, and I always double glue things, and I might even triple glue things to make sure that we don't have a failed casting, because epoxy is expensive. All right, while we're waiting for that to harden up, let's mix up some resin. This week we're going to be using deep casting epoxy from Designer Epoxy. This casting, I believe, is something like 12 inches tall. And of course, a fan favorite and a favorite of mine is Blue Laguna. So we're going to use that this week. And of course, some Hypershift. Love my Hypershift. If you haven't tried this, I definitely recommend getting some. And I think the Designer Epoxy has some of the best. All right, this is the first 1.5 liters. And man, I hope this doesn't leak. It's good. I don't see any leaks yet. A little worried about this. Looks like it got past the inner seal. Might be coming in from the bottom. As long as this one doesn't fail, please. Well, believe it or not, that's all I'm going to fill it to. So when we put this in the vacuum chamber, of course, this is going to foam really badly. So when we're all done with the vacuum chamber, I'll mix up a little bit more and top it up. But I want some space inside my vacuum chamber. I can do about 13 3/4 inches roughly in height. So I don't have a lot of room to play with, as this is 13.5 probably on the highest wing over here. Just making sure that this isn't going to leak before we put this in there. So far so good. All right, well, vacuum chamber coming up next. I'm often asked what I use for a vacuum chamber, and that's the manufacturer there. This one, so this came with the vacuum pump and of course the chamber. It was actually fairly reasonably priced. I got it off of Amazon. I think it was like $3.50 maybe, something like that. It wasn't really a lot of money, so it's not a huge investment for somebody getting into this. The only knock that I really have on this setup is that there's oil in the vacuum pump and it emits oil vapor, which apparently is normal, but it's still irritating. The other one that I have for my vacuum chucking system is oilless, and it's a much better unit, but it's a lot more money. Okay, going to add a little bit of resin here. Hopefully that will slow down the foaming that we're getting, but I don't know. This might make it harder to control, that's for sure. A little bit in reserve. And if you are on a limited budget and you want to get into resin casting, I'm often asked what I would pick. Would I pick a vacuum chamber over a pressure pot or vice versa? And I would definitely go with the vacuum chamber because then you can just cast your pieces on the bench. The pressure pot combined with the vacuum chamber, of course, will give you a superior casting though, but it's not necessary. Well, that's about 26 inches of vacuum. I'm just going to let that be for about another 15 minutes or so. Then I'll start it up again and then we'll see if I can bring it to full vacuum. I'll bring it back later on. Okay, well, we're finally at full vacuum. I've been able to pull full vacuum now for about an hour. So anyway, I'm going to release the vacuum, put this in the pressure pot, and we'll see you guys in there in 3 days. I should also mention that I added 3/4 of a liter of epoxy to top it off. Well, good morning. No leaks, happy days. I must say, it's too bad it's not perfectly round, so we'll have to fool around with that on the lathe and get that figured out. I'm going to try and knock this off. I don't know if I can, but let's give it a go anyway. That's most of it. No thermal cracking. That's a bonus. I'll lose about an inch overall off of this, which isn't too bad. I'm just going to clean this up to good wood, and then we're just going to set this on the lathe and try and figure out the best place for the centers. I definitely wouldn't trust this chipboard material to put the live center on, so that's why I'm grinding down to good wood. When we got over the lathe, I just eyeballed the center. It's pretty hard to figure out exactly where that's going to be. In the end, it actually worked out pretty nicely. That's probably about as good as we're going to get. She's kind of oblong. Starting off with the number 3 Hercules here from Hunter Tool Systems. Link in the description. It did take some effort to get this piece trued up, or round, if you will. And the Hercules, of course, is doing a good job of that. I didn't wear a glove. I probably should have. If pieces are more rounder and on center, I typically don't wear a glove. But when you have something like this, this resin was really cooperating quite well. So I just didn't really feel a need for it. But, you know, it is quite easy to have a piece of that basically chip off and cut you. So it's probably a good idea to wear a glove. Just make sure that the glove stays on the operator side of the tool rest and there shouldn't be any issues. So this piece, as you've seen from the thumbnail, has some really nice islands in it. And cherry burl is one of my favorite burls for casting with a blue tinted epoxy like this. And of course, like I said earlier, you know, Blue Laguna is probably my favorite pigment of designer epoxies. I would say that, you know, rainbow blue would have been another alternative here. But I do find that the Blue Laguna, and of course there's ocean, but designer epoxy has all kinds of different blues. And a lot of them will really go well with this. Probably the majority of them will probably go well with this. But the combination of that Hyper Shift and the Blue Laguna, this piece is just absolutely beautiful. And I really like the look of it, and hopefully you guys do as well. So we have a bunch of new subscribers. So, you know, I'd like to personally thank you for subscribing. I know that there's a lot of competition here on YouTube for your subscription, and I'm really glad that you've chosen to subscribe to my channel. So thank you for that. And if you're not aware, I do voiceovers on all of my videos. I think that a lot of people really appreciate knowing what's going on and not just silent videos where you're leaving people guessing. There are both sides of that. Don't get me wrong, I understand all of that. But if you're anything like me, I kind of thirst for knowledge when I'm watching stuff. And the last thing that I want to do is just watch a silent video and not really know what's going on. So that's one of the main reasons why I've switched to doing voiceovers. I know that there seems to be a thirst for this kind of content. So I'm glad to bring it. And I'm glad that everybody, well, not everybody enjoys it. Let's be honest, not everybody enjoys the voiceovers, but I think that the majority do. So thank you. So it's decision time. Now you'll notice that I put 2 tenons on here, and they're very small and not really meant to do a whole lot than just kind of hold the piece for me to get a glue block on the bottom of this. But I'm not sure exactly what's going to be up and what's going to be down. Okay, so I know that there's a, you know, I really like this look. It 100% looks like islands. This is an island chain, and it would be absolutely beautiful to keep this. But you know, I want to give this some style. I don't want to just make a straight walled vase or just a tapered vase or just a rounded over vase. I want something. Right now what I'm thinking is that I want to come in sharply and then gradually come out and then dip in again and then flare out at the top. That's kind of the vision that I have in my head for this. But the problem is I don't really know what's going to be up and what's going to be down yet. Really, either way, it probably doesn't matter all that much. I don't know, because there's a real heavy resin pocket that goes across here, and then the rest of it I believe is wood, and it's kind of the same thing up on this upper edge. As you can see, that wood has really been penetrated by the resin, so that's awesome. I think this is going to be quite a solid piece. So I don't know. I think I'm going to leave this the bottom. So we'll have to reverse this and clean off this so I can stick a glue block on here. Yes, I'm going to do a glue block. So yeah, I know that some people may find that funny that I don't really know when I pull these castings out which way I'm going to orientate it. And it's not really until you strip off the excess epoxy and you're looking at it and you say, okay, this will probably look better in this orientation. Like I said in the video, that it probably really didn't matter all that much. But regardless, we're going to prep this for a waste block that's been melted or dipped in hot melt glue. And that, of course, is an end grain tenon, so it's not going to break off. Once the glue hardened, then, of course, we're just going to trim this back with a 5/8 bowl gouge from David Ellsworth and get our tenon set. Once again, when you're making these tenons, you see me measuring there. My jaw depth is a 1/2 inch, 13 millimeters. So you want that tenon to be short of that. You don't want it to bottom out in the chuck. You want the top of the jaws resting on the bottom of the casting. So the other thing too is when you take away that tailstock support, You got a lot of length that's overextended from the chuck. So you got to make sure that you take really light cuts, or there's an easy chance you can rip this out. And one of the main reasons for that is because on the upper end, it's only really being held by wood that's been penetrated by the epoxy, and it's really hard to get a bite on it. So what we're going to do is, now that we've reversed this, at least now it's mounted in the chuck, it's a lot safer to work with. And of course, one of the problems that you have with this art form is that when it comes off, that's it. There's no putting it back on. There's no, you can try and reshape things, and you'll see a little bit of that later on in this video. But you know, this is a very unforgiving art form. If it's just one of these things that, I try to put as much thought into it as I can after I've got the casting stripped off and stand back and look at it. Look at the difference between the old cutter and the new cutter. I'm taking some pretty big bites here, and it's leaving a really nice cut behind. And there you can see those islands coming through, the variations within the epoxy. Right away, I could tell this is going to be a really nice piece. A lot of people ask, when should I rotate the cutter? And, and I find that when the cutter is starting to get dull, it, of course, doesn't cut as cleanly, and it also generates a lot of heat. So if you've got a dull cutter, that heat will migrate up the shaft of the tool, and it actually can get so hot that it's hard to hold on to, and you may have to dip it in water. If you get to that stage, it's time to either rotate the cutter or replace it. So as you watch me shape this piece, the great thing about doing these voiceovers, of course, you can address in the comments what was last week's video. And if you missed it, last week's video was with Banksia Pod cookies from Australia, and of course a gold and green resin. So it was an Australian themed project, and every time I make a country themed project, it's always a little scary for me, because I certainly don't want to offend any people in those countries, because that certainly is not my intention. But anyway, it was well received, so thank you for all the Aussies that chimed in and said, no, that's a good representation. Even though their flag is blue with a Union Jack on it and stars, for me, I always associate Australian colors with the green and the gold. So that was awesome. But when you talk about themed projects, about 50% of my views come from the US. And a while back, I did a Stars and Stripes themed clock, and that video absolutely tanked. I was really surprised by that. It just, with my viewership being so high in the US, I was really surprised that it didn't do very well. So, I'm going to link that at the end of this video. If you haven't seen that video, which, well, that'll probably be the majority of you, because it wasn't pushed to anybody. But, that's life for, being a content creator for YouTube. Sometimes they really push a lot of videos, and a lot of times they don't. But there's that one island all in the middle of the sea. Just the dark variations in this, just really cool. Totally looks like island chains to me. So we're going to drill this piece out. I originally was going to make this into a bud vase, but it ended up being too large for that. So I had lots of room to hollow this out. So we're going to drill this out all the way down. I left about an inch in the very bottom of this. Started with an 1.25 inch bit, and then stepped up to the 2-inch bit. I did have to put an extension in. You'll see at the very end here, in the last of the drilling. But went fairly easy. Not very many issues at all here. Yeah, there's the extension there. So the last thing that I want to do before we do any hollowing here is just open up the mouth of this vase, just to give me a little bit more working room, instead of just leaving it a straight cylinder all the way down to the bottom. And once that's done, we'll set up the hollowing rig and get the hollow in this piece. All right, we're all set up and ready for hollowing. This is the retrofit tool from Hunter Tool Systems. The set right now at 3/4 of an inch. We'll close that up as we go. I also put some tape on here. Some people have been telling me to do this. I think as long as the wheels are nice and flat on a piece like this, it's probably okay, but I threw this painter's tape on there just to try it out. The other thing is I've sprayed all the surfaces with the glide coat, so things are moving very freely, which is exactly what you want. And along with that, I've also got this tapped out and a 9/16 inch bolt in there so that there's no way that the rig can fall out. Anyway, this shouldn't hopefully take too much effort to do, but I guess you never know. I shouldn't say these things, but anyway, there's the laser system there. If you haven't seen this before, this is the captive system from One Way. Absolutely love this. All right, let's see how we make out here. I think this is going to be a really, really nice piece when it's done. So yeah, the retrofit tool here. I actually used the retrofit tool all the way through this project. It actually performed quite well in this cherry. I didn't see the need to go to the teardrop cutter at all. As far as the sale of my house update, our house I should say, there's nothing to report. We did have a showing last week. It was very positive, but I think in the end it's just not for them. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, my wife and I plan on moving back home to our home province of New Brunswick that's on the East Coast. The only reason that we're here in Petawawa, Ontario is because there is a large military base here, and this was my last posting. I did 24 years in the Canadian Army. So we've made the decision to move home, and really what we're waiting on right now is the military to issue posting messages. And once that happens, I think that we're going to see things pick up quite a bit. And the great thing about when people are here on house hunting trips is, you know, the time crunch is on. I believe they only get a week now to go in and try and find a house to live in for their next posting. So it's fast and furious. So we expect, and so do my real estate agents, expect it to pick up. But, you know, we're just kind of waiting. It looks like spring is here early, which, you know, I was talking to my wife last night when we built this house that we're in right now in the workshop that you see me working in here. It was a very early spring, and that was one of the things that helped us get the house and the workshop made. And because we had a closing date on the house that we were in the town here. So, you know, we're just waiting. We're in a holding pattern. There's not really anything we can do about it. I'm a little concerned that since spring is early, you know, my contractor is probably going to want to start building soon. And we really had hoped that this place would be sold prior to that because we just don't want to carry two mortgages. But I guess if we have to, we have to. But I know it's a decision that we're going to have to make. And we're just at this point not 100% sure what we're going to do. All right, so I totally forgot that I had bought this, and this is a little LED light that Cindy Drozda has come up with. Just plugs into your normal plug, and it is an LED light, 6 lights, 2 rare earth magnets on the back side. And of course, the idea with this is you stick it on the inside of your tool rest, and there it will provide light down inside the hollow form or whatever you're working on, the vase in this case, when you're turning. I got this from Stockroom Supply here in Canada. It does have a switch, turning it on and off. It wasn't cheap. It was around $60, I think. The only thing that really concerns me is I would really like to see this setup kind of encased in a rubber type material to protect this here. But we'll just have to be really careful with it and make sure that that there's no issues with it. But anyway, I totally forgot that I had this. So we're going to use it from now on. Got to make sure that that's not rubbing on the wire too. So I'll keep that on the other side of the tool rest. It should be fine. All right, let's get back at this. I mean, that shows you how much light it'll give you. It's not too bad. It would be better if this was tapered in, so it's more, or should say, if it was straighter in, it would allow more light to go into the form. But, you know, looking in there with the naked eye, there's actually lots of light. And that's where we're at so far. Still got to do the bottom yet. So even though you're dealing with some really hard burl and of course resin, and one of the problems with burl as far as trying to cut it cleanly is burl typically grows in all different directions. And so it's sometimes can be quite hard to cut cleanly, but of course the retrofit tool did well here. Now I've got it out to the side, and eventually, I think maybe in the next clip, it's actually straight, and you'll see the laser at, you know, the very bottom of the vase. Now I like to leave a little bit of mass in the bottom of these vases just to make them so they're not so tippy. If somebody happens to bump a table that it's sitting on, that it's not going to fall over. And I do whittle down that foot later on, because at the time I just didn't see that it was kind of big and heavy like it is. I do find that when you're working on work like this, sometimes it's hard to envision it on the lathe. And sometimes it's to your benefit to take it off the lathe and stand it upright and then stand back and look at it. But you'll see the laser falling on and off the form. And of course, when it basically disappears off the form, then you know you've achieved your wall thickness, and you're able to move forward from there. So I'm going to show you a new tool in the inventory, and this comes from Hunter Tool Systems as well, and this is the Wide Reach Baron tool. He has another one that is straighter. I like this one because you can get up underneath, say, undercutting rims on bowls and in areas like this. The only thing that I don't really care for is the fact that it's strictly right-handed, and being left-handed, I do find sometimes tools like that can be challenging, but this one actually I was able to use quite well. Finally, on to sanding. We're going to do an epoxy coat on the inside and the outside of this. So I'm sanding from 60 to 180 with these 3.5 inch dipple discs from sandpaper.ca. And they're mounted right now on, I think it's about 1.5 inch sanding pad. So that wraps around that pad, and you're able to sand down the side walls of vases like this. I really like this method, and of course, with the drill extension, you can get deep down into the vase. Take this painter's tape off. Again, I don't know if I really needed it in this instance, but hey, I thought I would give it a try, and there was no marks on it. So this was done over the course of 2 days, like the shaping of this piece. And I just wanted to make sure that everything was running nice and true before we do any sanding on the outside of it. So I'm just taking some really light shear cuts with a Hercules. Had a couple of just small, tiny little holes to fill in, and I decided to go with the medium. Ordinarily, I would use the thin, but at this stage, I was a little worried about some glue staining. So with the medium, it typically doesn't do any glue staining, so that's one thing to take into consideration. Easily could have used the UV epoxy from Designer Epoxy here, but you know, for the small couple little holes that there was, I didn't see it as an issue at all. And there we go, we're ready for sanding the outside of this. And just like the inside, the outside of this piece was sanded from 60 to 180 with a 3.5 inch dipple disc as well, in anticipation to the epoxy coat. All right, we're going to do an epoxy coat on this. This is 3 ounces of the Pro Series and a silicone barbecue brush. Some people are wondering why I'm switched to doing epoxy coats on, you know, on castings like this. And it's not so much a problem on the outside because you have easy access to it. But on the inside, a lot of times you don't have really good access to it. So there may be some cracks in the wood because it's the center of the casting and maybe the epoxy didn't get to it, or you could have some epoxy chip out. So this addresses those issues and it just makes a better product, straight up. Well, what do you think of that? Man, that cherry burl is something else. It's already dry in spots. I got to put it back on the lathe and give it another coat of the Pro Series. The resin's just fantastic. Fantastic. Really, really love this Blue Laguna and that hyper shift in there. Well, it just tops it off. Ooh. All right, throw this back on. We'll put some more epoxy on. And we'll see you guys tomorrow for the first coat of Waterlux. Well, alrighty, it is the next day. Lots of bubbles, fully expected that. A lot of dry areas too. Would have liked to see those filled in a little better than they are. Another dry spot there. But you know, I took some pictures of this yesterday before quitting, and I'm finding the foot is too large on this. So, you know, sometimes it's not until you take a picture that you really see that maybe it's a little too large. So, you know, I'm going to easily take, say, a ½ inch off of this, the overall size, maybe even more than that. So I'm going to whittle that back until I'm happy with it. And then, of course, we'll sand this up and get our first coat of Waterlux on. There's what it looks like on the inside. There's a couple of bubbles in there, so I'll need to do a little bit of sanding in there and probably give that another coat on the inside as well. But, I mean, love that hyper shift and that Blue Laguna. Crazy stuff. And the cherry burl, well, hey, it ain't bad either. So we're able to pick the speed up here a little bit. Yeah, I set that in my clean room, put it on the bench, took a photo of it, and then I was looking at it later on. I'm like, you know, that foot is just too large. It's got to get whittled down to a more delicate form, if you will. And, you know, I should mention that I've got 2 tours to Afghanistan, and of course, when I was there, I was able to buy some marble pieces, and this design is very reminiscent of the pieces that I actually purchased in Afghanistan. So I whittled down this foot and started sanding at 180, and I was going to go all the way to 800. And then you'll see me. I'll stop sanding here and stand back, and you know I'm just not happy still with the way this foot looks. So I decided to thin out the foot a lot more, basically create a cove. Well, it creates kind of 2 coves and a little raised bead. And just that little detail, I think, really kind of blings up the piece, if you will, gives it some more style. So I'm really happy that I did that, and I personally think that it really improves the foot area on this. Anyway, when that was done, just carried on sanding all the way to 800. And then, of course, we'll be able to use the Triple E buffing compound and clean it up with some denatured alcohol and get our first coat finish on Waterlux. Yeah, there's the buffing compound from the Beal buffing system. And I think a lot of people don't really understand the importance of cleaning off these pieces with some sort of alcohol before that coat of finish goes on. And but it is really important to clean it off. That way you don't have any adhesion issues with the finish sticking to your piece because of that right there. Alrighty, here's your first coat of Waterlux gloss. Well, there it is in its first coat of Waterlux. Love my Waterlux. And there's a lot going on in this piece. The burl island being the best part, I think. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this. I still need to put another coat of epoxy on the inside, but you know, I've done down inside of the neck on this, so I really like this foot better than the other foot, to be 100% honest with you. Very cool. We'll see you tomorrow for the second coat. So this is in fact the next day, and we're using the Triple E buffing compound again just to flatten and level the surface before the next coat goes on, and of course cleaning it with that denatured alcohol. Good morning, this is the second coat of Waterlux Gloss. All right, well there it is in its second coat of Waterlux. Love the resin areas, love the chair areas. I know I've said that before, but man, that one island in the middle of the sea, very cool. Certainly this detail right there is really, really awesome. If there is a third coat, I will do it the same as this one. And other than that, we'll see when we're doing the bottom. So that's a small little block of cherry that I had kicking around. So I need to make a drive. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to put the top part of the vase on this piece. So I'm just sizing it up. Once we get it mounted into the chuck, I'll have to clean it up again just to make sure that it's running true. And then when that's done, we'll be able to start working on the bottom. So yeah, that's what it looks like there. And the great thing about that, if you got different profiles and different sizes, it's a really good thing to have, where you can just slam it in the chuck and you know, you don't have to go through this step. I am taking away all the sharp edges though. And of course, that's some router padding. And we're just going to take down the rest of this glued on tenon with the bowl gouge from David Ellsworth. And then when that's done, we'll be able to start sanding. Now, I sand this piece here as it is, and then just kind of break the nub off later on and finish sanding it off the lathe. But that's a real rigid pad, so I really like that. You know, run the lathe in reverse. And as you can see, it kind of grooves it out almost a little bit. You'll see it here in a second. Well, that's going to do it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And hey, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do that. That way we can get more people on board here on the channel. All right, let's have a last little chat about this week's piece. I must say that I really do like it, and hopefully you guys do as well. Well, what do you think? I think that this is possibly in the top 5. I don't know if it's much higher than that, but I would definitely put it in the top 5. That cherry burl is just absolutely spectacular with the little burl eyes, and you know, this area right here, it really does look like a landmass, and then this is a beach, and you know, it kind of try and get that shine on there correctly, and then it just kind of goes off into deeper water. Anyway, that's the way it looks like to me. There's lots of examples of that in this piece all the way around it. And there's an island in the middle of nowhere. Very, very cool. I did manage to get 2 coats of epoxy on the inside of this. It's pooled a little bit on the bottom, but I'm good with that. Bottom, we're going to take this so you can read it. And just like normal, didn't get a chance to get a finish on. So that will take at least 2, maybe even 3 coats to seal that all up. And then this is ready to go to its new home. This is for sale. If you're interested, send me an email to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com and I'll disclose the price then in case this is a gift. If you're curious about the size, it's 9 7/8 inches tall, about 4.5 inches at the opening at the top, and I believe this is pretty close to being the same width. And it's my typical 1/2 inch thickness, somewhere around there. Really beautiful piece. I've got a couple of other pieces of cherry burl like this, so we may see more of this type of stuff in the future with those. Don't forget to put designer epoxy in the comments down below to be entered into the next giveaway at 130,000 subscribers when we get there. Of course, that's only open to residents of Canada and continental USA. And if you use my code InlayJim at checkout with designer epoxy, you'll get 10 free color bags, 10% off your order, and free shipping within continental USA and Canada. So fantastic deal. And again, all my other sponsors are in the description down below. If you need some stuff, head on down there and put some money back in your pocket. Really like this piece, and I really hope that you guys do too. And like I said, I'm gonna put the American clock video, Stars and Stripes, I think is what I called it. I'll put that at the end of this video so that hopefully you guys get a chance to watch it, because I screw up a little bit in it, which is kind of normal, and I have to redo things. So it's kind of an educational lesson too, for those who haven't seen it. All right, well, that's it. Next week, we're going to do something that's hopefully out of this world. That's what it's going to be. Hopefully, it's going to be out of this world. But anyway, come on back for that next week. Take care, stay safe. Don't forget the bell. Please share my videos with your friends. That is the largest way for me to build my presence here on YouTube. I would really appreciate it. And of course, that thumbs up will always help with the analytics too. See you next week.